Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. As some of you know, if you care, a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago or so, Star Wars: The Last Jedi came out. If you follow me at all, you know that I had a pretty strong reaction to that film. So you obviously know my reaction, but I wanted to give you some of the reasons behind my reaction. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So if you noticed, a couple weeks ago I published a GoFundMe, and the GoFundMe was pretty much asking to raise $200,000 to put billboards in Palo Alto, California. Where else? Anaheim, where Disneyland is, and in the great city of Orlando, where Disney World is, protesting The Last Jedi. I felt very strongly about it, and I got a lot of interesting reactions to that. A lot of people looked at it and they were like, that's ridiculous. Why would you start a GoFundMe? I had people say, like, aren't there more important causes? Like, shouldn't you start a GoFundMe for poverty or things that are important? And I know that people didn't understand why I created that GoFundMe. Did I actually think that I was going to raise $200,000 for billboards? 10% chance I thought it might happen. But the other 90%, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So why did I create a GoFundMe to protest a major corporation for a film that I disagreed with? I'll tell you. The reason I created the GoFundMe is because when I watched the movie, and I'll tell you about the context of when I first watched the movie. When I first watched The Last Jedi, I had a very strong opinion about it. Now, and it's similar to the opinion that I'm going to share with you here in a little bit. And when I went online over the next couple days, I was so surprised because there were a lot of people, the majority of people who watched this movie, they loved it. And then there were people that I agreed with that didn't like it. And I was amazed at the amount of belittlement that these people who didn't like it faced from the people who did like it, from the vast majority. I watched people who genuinely cared about Star Wars, who shared my opinion, who shared my taste for good characters, good story, and they were getting shredded apart, or the worst, which is so common in our society, people just saying, who cares? Fanboys, nerds, Disney owns it. Disney can do whatever they want. Who cares about your opinion? And that's why I made the GoFundMe. I made the GoFundMe so that I could hopefully connect with some of these other people and say, hey, you're not alone. You're not alone. I hate it when I see people getting ganged up on, especially when I agree with them. And I saw this entire group of people that were just getting hated on because they disliked the movie. And that really, I was like, that's not cool. So I took 30 minutes, typed up text, texted my brother and said, hey, can you get me a generic picture of a billboard that says Disney murdered, and then we changed it to ruined. Disney ruined Star Wars, and we'll put it up there. And I think a lot of people, when I do things like that, they think that I'm serious. And if you don't know me, I am a person of hyperbole. So much of what I do in my personal life, wherever I'm at, it's energy, it's hype, it's exaggeration. And that's effective. It works, especially when you're talking about protests. One of the great things about protests, whether you're protesting inequalities in society or you're protesting against corporations, is that the protest itself isn't just an attention-seeking behavior. The protest in itself is a way to connect with like-minded people. So I post a GoFundMe saying that I'm going to set up billboards, and I connect with people across the internet who share my opinion, and it makes me feel a little less alone. It makes them feel a little less alone, and that's why I made it. I didn't make it for you. I made it for me, and I made it for the people who share my opinion to just say, hey, you're not alone. And so that's why I did it. I even sat there before I was even considering posting it. I was looking at it, and I was like, is this worth it? Like, is this worth my time telling people that I care about this? And finally, I was like, you know what? It is. And because, for all those people who say, who cares? Who cares what you think? Well, I'm just a person who does care. Like, in my life, I care about things. And yes, this is Star Wars. Yes, this is fiction. But I think through this experience, I've come to realize that I really do care about Star Wars. I really do like Star Wars. And from the time I was a kid, Star Wars has been meaningful for me. And so you can look at people and say, it doesn't matter. I mean, Disney's not going to change. They're not going to scrap the movie. They're not going to change anything for you. And that's absolutely right. But I care. I care. And I feel like in a culture where people are just like, whatever. I feel like in my experience, caring about things and stepping out and taking action on those things has connected me with people who share similar passions. And it has just been it's been a really great experience for me. And so I do care, whether that's a character flaw that you perceive or not, whether you think I'm just overreacting to things, whatever. I will gladly take the title of a person who cares about things. Black Lives Matter. All right, so moving on, when it comes to Star Wars, it's pretty clear that we approach Star Wars for different things. I mean, everybody does. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've seen great conversations where people were saying, I didn't per se like The Last Jedi, or I didn't like everything about it, but it had enough of the Star Wars stuff that I liked to be like, it's all right. I can wait for the next one. That's fine. And then there were people who absolutely loved it. Like, they loved the action sequences. They loved all that stuff. And then there were people who hated it. Everybody comes to Star Wars with something different. It means something different to everybody. And so, I'm going to say that from the outset. Everybody has their own opinion on this. For me, my personal story with Star Wars is that I think I was like 10 years old, 9 years old, and I was never introduced to Star Wars by my parents. I was digging through some old VHS tapes of my grandma's, and I came across this tape, and it said Return of the Jedi, and I'm like, that's cool. And it was recorded off of TV, so it was handwritten on a label, Return of the Jedi. So I'm like, I don't know what that is. So I pop it in the VHS, and I start watching, and it's like, I watch C-3PO and R2-D2, which I didn't know their names at that point, and they're walking into Jabba's palace, and I'm just like, and my brother's there with me, I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And then I realized that there was a movie before it called Star Wars, and this is hilarious. I didn't know The Empire Strikes Back existed for a year. So I watched Star Wars and then picked it right back up with Return of the Jedi. And my brother and I were laughing about this the other day. When Yoda at the beginning of Return of the Jedi says, Darth Vader's your father, we were like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Okay, we'll roll with it. And so for the first year of Star Wars, we just totally geeked out about Star Wars and Return of the Jedi, which is I think is ironic, because that's what I'm going to do with this trilogy. I'm going to have The Force Awakens, and then I'm going to conveniently skip the middle section. I'm probably never going to show it to my children, and then I'm going to go on to whatever JJ does with the next one, and just bridge the gap somehow. But that's my connection with Star Wars. And then I think also throughout this process, I just realized that, I am a Star Wars nerd. Like, there was a significant period of my life from like 10 to 16, like right before I met my girlfriend / wife, when I kind of left that stuff behind. From 10 to 16, I was a Star Wars nerd. Like, I totally was. And looking back, I realized it. Like, I made trading cards, and I knew the names of the planets, and I envisioned my own movies, and I read entire book series, and I guess I can own that. Like, I was a nerd. Now, whether I'm a fanboy or not, whatever. But I was totally a Star Wars nerd for a period of my life, which I think is why I care so much about this series. So there's a connection with my childhood, and there's a connection with, a significant part of my growth as a person was wrapped around Star Wars, and especially the original trilogy. Okay, so getting into sort of the review, it's still going to be a while, but getting into the review, I think for a lot of us, when we watch a movie, it's okay for that movie to be flawed. There are movies that we go into and they are just flawed through and through, and we watch it and we go, oh, that was garbage. But then there are other movies that we watch them, and yes, they're flawed, but there's enough redemptive qualities to those movies that we say, it was all right. Yeah, it was worth it. That's cool. And so I think the phrase that I wrote here is that it's okay for a Star Wars movie to be flawed as long as. And that's what we're debating. That's what we're debating when we're talking about The Last Jedi. No one that I've seen on the internet has said that The Last Jedi is a perfect movie. Everybody has said that there's flaws, but they say it's okay for it to have flaws as long as And that's where everybody disagrees. That's where everybody fills in their own blank, because everybody has come to Star Wars with a little bit different of an experience. And I'm going to give you mine to start it off. It's okay for a Star Wars movie to be flawed as long as, here's the 5 things that I look for in a Star Wars movie. In a Star Wars movie, I want it to, number 1, I want it to tell a good story. Number 2, I want it to have strong, consistent characters. And by characters, if you're unfamiliar with that, I mean characterization. The characters are developed. They have a story. They have something that drives them. So almost like real characters. Number 3, awesome action sequences with video effects. Number 4, so I expect the Star Wars films to stir my imagination. And number 5, I expect the Star Wars films to be big enough for my eyes and my brain. Like I want to be able to feel it, and I want to be able to think. So a really good Star Wars movie is a movie that I can take it in, but at the same time, I can engage with it on an intellectual level. So those are the things that I love about Star Wars. And let me see here. I think that there were some people who would look at this and they would say, those 5 things are like super high expectations. Like, why didn't you just go into the Star Wars with no expectations or low expectations? That's how I live life. I live life with low expectations, and then I go in and I'm pleased with anything. I don't do that. Especially when it comes to Star Wars. Like, and it's not just an arbitrary thing that I make up. I go into Star Wars with high expectations because Star Wars films are awesome. Like the original trilogy, in my opinion, those films are awesome. They told a good story, had strong characters, crazy video or effects for their time. My imagination went crazy when I watched them, and they fed my eyes and my brain. Those were things, and this isn't a concept I came up with. Star Wars gave it to me. George Lucas gave it to me. And so when I walk into The Last Jedi, my expectation is, Rian Johnson, you make a Star Wars film. I'm not coming in with low expectations and then, oh, wow, it was more than I expected. It was more than garbage. It wasn't like a Phantom Menace. Like, no, I go in and I say, you make a freaking good Star Wars movie, which is exactly what I did with The Force Awakens. And I walked out of that movie and I said, now that is a Star Wars movie. Literally, on my Facebook, my status said, now that is a Star Wars movie. Okay, so high expectations are totally okay, in my opinion. So, whatever. I was going to give you like how I would rank the Star Wars films, but that's going to take too long. Let me tell you about my first viewing experience. I've watched it twice. My first viewing experience with The Last Jedi, we were supposed to have the human experience that night, which is a mentoring group, and the facility that we were going to use, they had to cancel. And so I was like, man, I'm just going to have like a dad moment. And I'm just going to say, hey guys, we're going to go watch Star Wars together. This is going to be awesome. So we bought tickets. We all went to the theater. So I'm there with like 12 of my kids, and we're sitting there in the theater, and I'm like, yeah, like this is going to be awesome. Like some of them had never seen a Star Wars movie. And so I'm like, I'm going to be able to introduce them to Star Wars. This is going to be great. And so that's the context of my first viewing. Now, I need to point this out. When they were watching the movie, about 45 minutes in, I looked around, and 2/3 of them were asleep. And I don't even have to tell you which part it was that they fell asleep on. It was crazy. Last night, I was just reading a random article, and Anderson Cooper, this is a direct quote. He said, I actually saw it last night and walked out. I know, I'm sorry. I got a lot of things going on. I had a lot of work to do. I had a lot on my mind. It wasn't in protest. I'm going to see it again. I just had too much in my head. I went down to the theater on 23rd Street about 45 minutes in, and I was like, yeah, I'm not giving this the attention it deserves. Notice he said about 45 minutes in. So even Anderson Cooper was about to fall asleep at, you know exactly which part I'm talking about. Even Anderson Cooper, he didn't know it. He didn't want to admit it, but it was a really like annoying, pointless, boring part of this movie. And 2/3 of my human experience kids fell asleep, and Anderson Cooper was about to fall asleep, so he left at this part. Anyway, just wanted to point that out. Okay, so before I jump into some other stuff, gosh, I'm probably just going to skip most of the stuff that I have written down. Because it's running really long. But if you're listening at this point, who cares? Like, I got you. This movie reminded me of Attack of the Clones. And here's why. when I went into Attack of the Clones, or I'll say when I walked out of Attack of the Clones, which is episode 2, I was like, wow, that is the greatest Star Wars movie I've ever seen in my life. And even on my second viewing, I watched it and I was like, wow, that is the greatest Star Wars movie I've ever seen. Like, there's a detective story. You've got like a lot of action, conspiracy plots, assassinations. You've got Yoda fighting with a lightsaber. Like, that's insane. You've got the clone troopers. All of these new elements were introduced. Like, new things were being thrown at me that had never before been in the Star Wars universe. And I was like, that's awesome. And then over time, as many of us experience, Attack of the Clones has a really bad aftertaste. And some of the same people who ranked it as number 1 when it came out, suddenly they were ranking it as number 5 or number 6 now. Attack of the Clones. And I was the same way. And so I went through that Attack of the Clones experience, and when I walked out of The Last Jedi, the only thing I could think of was, man, this movie, like, it fed my eyes. It had so many new things that I had never seen in a Star Wars movie. Like that fight scene where Kylo Ren and Rey are fighting the Imperial Guards. Like, my entire life, I've wanted to see those Imperial Guards in a fight scene. Like, that was amazing. And the ship going through the smaller ship going through the giant ship, whatever you call those things, at hyperspeed. I mean, I hated it, but visually it was gorgeous. And there were so many things throughout it that we had never seen before in a Star Wars movie, that there was a part of me that wanted to walk out and be like, whoa, like, that was crazy. Like, they did things I've never seen before, and they did. Rian Johnson did. But having gone through that Attack of the Clones experience, even as I was watching it, I was like, man, like, this stuff, give it a year, give it 2 years, although JJ's probably going to save it, and everybody's going to go, oh, it was fine, but this movie's going to have a bad aftertaste. All these people that are like, yeah, greatest Star Wars movie ever. It's not. And over time, the more you watch it, when you get it on Blu-ray, you're going to be like, oh, okay. And I'm just saying, that was my experience, and I immediately associated certain elements of this with Attack of the Clones. All right. So with that being said, here's how I think the pitch meeting went with Rian Johnson. I have no idea. The pitch meeting with Rian Johnson and Disney. Rian Johnson said, hey, in the prequels, there was one main character, one protagonist, and his name was Anakin Skywalker. In the original trilogy, there was one protagonist, and his name was Luke Skywalker. And in this new one, there's a main protagonist, and her name is Rey. Now, there's a problem here, because we have the protagonist from the old trilogy in a film with the new protagonist from the new trilogy. This is a problem. And so Rian Johnson says, we've got some options here. We can either have Luke Skywalker come in as like the wise old sage, I'm passing the mantle, or we can kill him. And but he's Luke freaking Skywalker. And so we can't just kill him in a normal way. We've got to give him a death or something that has never been experienced before in the Star Wars universe. And I think when you pitch it that way, it's fine. Like, I'm even pleased with that. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have no qualms with that. My problem is that, let me see what I said here. I'm not going to talk about that. Well, anyway, going with Rian Johnson, there's a lot of people that I've noticed who have said, come on, like, he's making a sequel. Like, sequels are hard. Like, sequels are traditionally hard. And you're just putting a lot of pressure on him. And you can't expect, when you make a Star Wars movie, you can't expect to please everyone. And I see what people are saying, but I also disagree with certain elements. Like, I'm not calling this movie bad because it's a sequel. I'm calling this movie bad because I think it's a bad movie, like an average movie, when Star Wars movies are usually great. So yeah, it's an average movie. Any other sci-fi movie, I would have watched it and been like, it was okay. I don't really want to watch it again, but it was okay. But this is a Star Wars movie. So, like, Rian Johnson, it's not like, I don't know, when you talk about sequels, he was given the greatest material ever. Like, outside of, like the Bible, oh gosh, but outside of the Bible or something like that, like, he was given Star Wars, like, so you get to make a sequel with Star Wars with all of this rich history, with all these characters. That's not a bad sequel to step into, really. I mean, it's not. And besides, who made the rule that it's hard to make a sequel? I mean, you look at like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which I'll talk about later. Some people consider The Dark Knight to be a great sequel. Cody. I had Hellboy 2 was a great sequel. If I really wanted to start a fight, I could say The Matrix Reloaded was a great sequel. So a lot of directors prove themselves by making sequels. So saying, oh, it's a sequel, it's tough to do, it's not an excuse. He's a director, he's got a job to do. His job is to make a sequel, and he's got great material. The other thing is that, like, you didn't see James Cameron whining when he received Aliens to direct. He wasn't like, oh man, I've got Ridley Scott's movie. I wish I didn't have this. I wish I could make a movie of my own. No, he made Aliens, which is good. And then 10 years later, 20th Century Fox gave him the largest budget ever for a Hollywood movie. Like, that's how directors prove themselves, is I'm going to hand you a sequel, or I'm going to hand you the third film or the fourth film, and you just do something great with it. You prove your worth as a director. So the whole sequel thing to me, I'm like, whatever. And then last, the pressure of the job, I don't buy this. I just don't. You can't tell me that Rian Johnson, sitting in a room writing this script, felt any more pressure than M. Night Shyamalan felt when he was writing, let's say, Split or The Last Airbender. You can't tell me that he felt any more pressure than Christopher Nolan felt when he was writing Inception or Interstellar. When you're a writer-director, you feel pressure. Especially in those positions, you know that what you write will reach millions of people. So you feel the pressure. So the pressure is relative. It's not like Rian Johnson was feeling more pressure than anyone else. It's just pressure. It's a tough job. And so, okay, you do it. All right. And so here's my thesis. This is what I'm going to talk about. The Last Jedi is a bad movie because Rian Johnson, number one, destroyed Luke Skywalker and replaced him with an unrecognizable shell of a character. I wanted to say fact, but I'm going to pull that back. Number two, he wrote a poorly designed, overhanded script with enormous logical gaps and painfully bad sequences and dialogue. And number three, Rian Johnson toyed with and squandered the powerful elements that George Lucas and JJ gave him to work with, from characters to plot devices, the things that make a Star Wars film a Star Wars film. All right, so here's how I knew 5 minutes into this movie that we were in trouble. Like, I'm sitting there in the theaters surrounded by my kids, and I know that we're in trouble 5 minutes into this movie. All right, so here's how I knew. Number one, the your mama joke exchange between Poe and Hux. I didn't laugh. I didn't think it was a funny joke. I know that there's probably some people out there who thought it was funny. There's definitely people who watched it the second time, and they're like, oh, I gotta laugh this time. In the theater that I was in, there were very few laughs. Like, it was just a joke that fell flat. And I was like, okay, whatever. The joke fell flat. That happens. And, this is the beginning of the movie. But this is going to sound weird. This is going to sound crazy. And some people are going to say you're ridiculous. The moment that I knew that something was going downhill was when Poe's X-Wing fighter got hit. And he sends BB-8 down into the ship to fix it. And there's this insane, 30-second sequence that's totally Jar Jar Binks. There's a malfunction on the grid, the computer somewhere, and how does BB-8 fix it? He takes a metal appendage and he sticks it in there. Just like in a cartoon where there's water coming through the wall and they plop their finger into, and they're just trying to keep the water from coming through. BB-8 starts doing that, and I'm like, what is happening here? And then eventually BB-8 just goes, I don't know, bam, and he smacks it, and the X-Wing starts working. I don't know if you noticed it. That's a total Jar Jar Binks move. If Jar Jar Binks was doing that, if he actually had to speak, and it wasn't an animated little droid, you would be like, that's ridiculous. So I'm sitting there watching the movie, and I'm like, that's not a good sign. It just isn't. And in real time, that's what I thought as I was watching the movie. And again, I wanted this movie to be as awesome as everybody said it was going to be. So there was that, and then Poe totally disobeys General Leia's orders. She gives him a direct order as his general, and he doesn't do it. He says, no, I'm going to do my thing. And then, I'll get into that later, but I was just like, what? That doesn't even make sense. You may correct me, but is there any indication that Poe, the character, defies orders from leadership? I don't know. Maybe I missed that in the Force Awakens. All right. So before I just jump in and totally as I see it, shred this movie to pieces, I want to give you the things that I thought were good. Number one, I love the diversity. It's one of the things I loved about The Force Awakens. I loved that there were many skin tones, many ethnicities, many cultures represented in this movie. That was absolutely awesome, and I love it. Number 2, the porgs. Those were awesome. Like that scene where Chewie is eating one of the porgs, and everybody else there is like that is so good, and that is so Star Wars. That I loved it. Even like when the porgs are like hitting the glass of the Millennium Falcon, that was awesome. I love the porgs. Like, I totally endorse the porgs. That's probably the best thing from The Last Jedi. For real. Like, the porgs are the best thing in The Last Jedi. Remember this in like 5 years when you agree with me. All right, so the throne room scene with the Imperial Guards, that was awesome. Daisy Ridley did a great job. Adam Driver did a great job in a role that was like, I don't even know how you do that role, man, because Rian just gave you like nothing to work with, and you're still acting good. And then Mark Hamill, he did a great job with his poker face. Like, Mark Hamill, for playing a character that wasn't Luke Skywalker, he did a really good job. The special effects were phenomenal. Like, those were the things, I was geeking out. Like, those are the things that my eyes were enjoying. This movie had some awesome special effects sequences. I loved it when when Luke handed Leia the dice that had been Han Solo's, how it had that little Han Solo, like the Han and Leia theme from The Empire Strikes Back. I was like, oh, that's great. I love it. That's cool. Even though I was hating the movie by then. I love the casino, not the casino scene, but I love the casino itself with all the diverse characters. It was like the cantina on Tatooine, Mos Eisley. Like, it was just great. I thought that was fun. I love the fact that JJ is taking over. And that they are trashing, getting rid of Colin Trevorrow or whatever, because he shouldn't have been hired in the first place. So JJ's taking over. And for all of those people who say, oh, why do you like The Force Awakens? It's just repeating everything that's in Star Wars. Well, number one, I'll say the Rian Johnson repeated a bazillion things from The Empire Strikes Back. Whether that's like Force sequences, like with Luke in the cave, or Rey in like the mirror, like reflection experience, or whether that's the entire plot revolving around hyperspace. Rian Johnson took a lot from Empire Strikes Back, but beyond that, you have to understand the context that JJ was working in. I mean, the reason I think The Force Awakens is great is because in one movie, J.J. Abrams had to wash the bad taste out of our mouths from the prequels. Like, the 3 original Star Wars were just magical. Like, they were awesome. They were great, at least to me. And then the prequels were just so lackluster. Like, there were great elements to it, but they just fell so short, and everybody agreed on that. And so what his almost impossible task was to get people to believe in the magic that was Star Wars, to put their hope in Star Wars again after having their hopes dashed and dashed and dashed. And he did it. He did it. And you may say that he was rehashing the first Star Wars, but I say he was recapturing the spirit of Star Wars. And at the end of The Force Awakens, like, he had it set up for an awesome Star Wars movie. There were so many great things in there that were set up for an awesome Star Wars movie. All right, so the thing, and by the way, we don't need to replace The Last Jedi. Like, Disney doesn't need to scrap it as if they would. JJ's going to do a great job with the third film. I don't think he can redeem The Last Jedi, but he might even maybe do that. I mean, I think the third film's, I'm going to go watch it. I think it's going to be great. I mean, if you put look at JJ. JJ did The Alias. He did Lost. He did Mission Impossible 3. He did Star Trek. He did Super 8. He did Star Trek Into Darkness. He did The Force Awakens. The dude makes great movies, in my opinion. And so he's going to do a great job. He's going to redeem the series. I hope so. But I like JJ. So here's the things that I thought were meh. Like, they didn't bother me. How do you drop bombs in space? Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but it's Star Wars. Okay. Snoke's death. I guess this really made the fanboys and the speculators upset. When it happened, and this is not good, when it happened, I was like, okay. Like, I didn't feel like, oh, shoot, they just killed Snoke. I was like, oh, okay. Like, that just happened. So I wasn't, like, invested in the character. And if you say, like, well, we didn't know anything about Emperor Palpatine, like, that's not true. Like, we had at least met Darth Maul. We had met Count Dooku. We had, like, gone through movies with them where they weren't just projections. Like, we we had this, before Emperor Palpatine dies, we have 30 minutes of dialogue where he's just like toying with the main character, Luke Skywalker, and you get the general sense that this dude is straight up evil and twisted and messed up and likes to play with people's minds. And so you know who this Emperor Palpatine, you don't need a backstory, you just know that this guy's crazy. With Snoke, it's just like, I'm a bad guy and I've got force powers. And I'm like, okay, like, it is what it is. But when he died, it wasn't like I lost like a Darth Maul. It wasn't like I lost, it wasn't like I lost an Emperor Palpatine, a great character. He was just a face and a guy in a role. And then last, Captain Phasma, who cares? Who cares? She died. And she wasn't like a great character in the first movie. And Ryan just said, I got to get rid of her. I can't just keep carrying this character through. And that's an okay decision. All right, so let's get into my critique. As I said, I'm going to start off with Luke. Okay, so if you've watched all of this, I'm at a half hour right now talking. If you're still watching this, thank you so much. However, I'm going to pause it so my phone doesn't die. Actually, I don't know if I will. I think I'm just going to keep rolling. If you're watching, we're just going to keep going, and hopefully I don't run out of battery. Let me plug my phone in. I hope this doesn't screw anything up. Let me see here. Okay, we're plugged in. All right. If you're still here, I'm amazed, but let's get to the meat of this thing. All right. So I'll come out and say it. Disney hired a dude to pen a script about Luke Skywalker who doesn't understand anything about Luke Skywalker. Rian Johnson does not understand the character of Luke Skywalker. The character in this movie is unrecognizable. And here's where Rian Johnson screwed up. A mistake that most filmmakers would never make. You don't mess with Luke Skywalker. Like, Luke Skywalker is an amazing character. You have backstory. Time and time again, you've seen him make sacrifices for the people he loves. You've seen him, I'll get into that a little bit later, but, he's Luke Skywalker. You could plop him down in any scene where there's, a sense of injustice, or where people are being, hurt, or where his family is being attacked, or the dark side is coming. You could plop him in any scene, and Luke Skywalker will be Luke Skywalker, and he will make it a good scene. He will make it a good story. So the character of Luke Skywalker is golden. His character, in my opinion, is set. And Rian Johnson, of course, is like, you know what? He's a great character, but I'm just going to completely reinvent him. I'm going to reinvent him, and there's going to be this experience with his nephew that's this catalyst to turn him completely around. Okay. All right. Yeah, 40 years of development, but Rian Johnson, you know this character. You even know him better than Mark Hamill, apparently. All right. So let me see here. Let's see. So Luke Skywalker, here's the character of Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is a character that is a hero who sacrifices himself for what is right. That's what he's done time and time again. He's a good friend. He is a good friend to his friends consistently. He sacrifices for his friends. He has faith in people. He carries hope even when other people don't have it. Even when nobody believes Darth Vader's a good guy, Luke believes he's a good guy. That's Luke Skywalker. And heroes don't run. Luke Skywalker does not run, especially when people he loves are involved. This is one of the things that JJ did a great job with in The Force Awakens, in my opinion. So Han Solo and Chewie, they've planted all these bombs. They can totally leave the Starkiller base. And Han turns around and he sees his son. He sees Ben Solo, or Kylo Ren. And in a beautiful move, J.J. Abrams has the father figure turn and say, I could die right now. I probably will die, but it's worth going back to save my son. It's worth it. I love him so much that I'm going to go back and I'm going to sacrifice myself to let him know that I love him. And when Han Solo died, or was murdered, I thought it was one of the most, it was the fitting ending for Han Solo, because this is a character that started out wanting to run, and you have this beautiful moment where he has the opportunity to run, and he chooses into his son. He chooses to love his son and to step out there, even though he dies. He chooses it. And that's beautiful. Like that's who these characters are that George Lucas built in the original trilogy. I mean, it's like in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, again, Harrison Ford, you've got, and I'm talking about like late 70s, early 80s characters, which Luke Skywalker is. You have Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. He goes and he grabs the Shankara stones, which is why he's there. He stuffs them in his package, and then he hears a kid, like a shout, like a kid being tortured. And he stops and he's considering going back. And then he goes back in because there's kids that are being enslaved by the Thuggee cult. And that's who Indiana Jones is. He goes back in. Luke Skywalker, that's who he is. And let me prove this to you, because there's some people who are going, well, you can't say who he is. Things happen in people's lives that change their experiences. Let me just give you my case for this. All right, so one of the things that I think is great about Return of the Jedi is that Luke Skywalker does nothing to stop the Empire. All right? Oh, let me go back, because I have to preface this. In The Last Jedi, what Rian Johnson says is Luke Skywalker fell because he was too prideful. He became a legend. And because he was a legend, like that got to his head, and that's why he couldn't reach Kylo Ren. Like this is why he fell, because he's a legend and it blinded him. But I'm just gonna call bullcrap on this. And again, going back to Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker does nothing to stop the Empire. The entire movie of Return of the Jedi, he's out. Well, first he's out to help his friends, to save his friends, and then he's out to rescue his father, Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. He's not even a legend for what he does in The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, think about it. In The Empire Strikes Back, what does he do? The entire movie, he flies off, and he is trained by Yoda, not yoga. He's trained by Yoda on Dagobah, and then he goes to Cloud City to save his friends. These aren't things that are done in front of the entire galaxy. These aren't things that have galactic impact, per se. It's Luke showing us his character. When Yoda says, you need to stay and train, he says, I don't stay and train, I'm going to go help my friends. Like, that's Luke Skywalker. And so the reason Luke Skywalker is a legend, as evidenced in the movies, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, is that he blew up the Death Star in the first Star Wars. Like, he's a legend not because he's a Jedi Master and he's like, he did anything with the Empire or Darth Vader, which, I mean, he didn't significantly, that anyone else would care about. He cares about it, but no one else cares about it. He's a legend because he blew up the freaking Death Star. That's why he's a legend. And so for Rian Johnson to say, Luke had too big of a head because he was just cocky and he was a legend. So he had too big of a head as a Jedi because he was known around the galaxy for blowing up the Death Star. That's the reason he's a legend. That's why everybody from all corners of the galaxy know of Luke Skywalker, not because they're like, oh yeah, that Jedi Master. They're like, oh, that's that dude that blew up the Death Star. Like, he's a legend. That's what made him a legend. But the actual character development that we experienced in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, like, that's his character developing. That's George Lucas or Irvin Kershner or whatever the person who did the third Return of the Jedi, the director. That's them developing his character and showing us who he is. Luke Skywalker, you're telling me that a kid that starts out on Tatooine working on a farm, and again, I'm from Southern Ohio, I understand like what people who grow up in like rural areas are like, people who grow up like in areas where there's lots of space, where you're like dreaming and you want to be somewhere else. Like you're telling me that this guy who grew up on a farm, who, there was some mystery surrounding his biological parents, this guy who like has incredibly humble beginnings, this person who over time just sacrifices for people because he loves them. That this person then that has this traumatic experience and was like, oh, I'm gonna run away. Like, I'm sorry, but that's bogus. It's bogus. It's bogus. Nice job, Rian Johnson. You fool. I mean, I think you convinced a lot of people that you can go that route with Luke Skywalker, but that's not who he is. Even Mark Hamill said, this is Jake Skywalker. This is not Luke Skywalker. Like, even the guy who was playing the role was like, this dude's crazy, but I've signed a contract and I'm gonna get paid to do this, so I'll play Jake, whatever. All right, so let me see. So the first time Luke met the Emperor, he didn't even have a weapon like in his hand. He just walked in out of faith. because he cares about people. And so I really think Rian Johnson is banking on the fact that you have absolute faith in his storytelling. That just whatever he tells you, you're going to believe. Oh, so Luke now runs. Like there was this experience with Ben or Kylo, and now Luke, he's a runner. I mean, I know what you thought about Luke, but you didn't really know this guy. This guy, deep inside of him, there were the same pitfalls that we all fall into. Like this guy, I'm going to tell you it, and you're going to believe it. And he does that a lot in this movie. Like he gives us things, and he just expects us to believe it. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, why? Like again, with my eyes, I'm like, oh, cool. But with my head, in real time, as I'm watching the movie, I'm like, why? Like, okay, whatever. And so it's really funny too because he also paints this image that Luke is like lying by like omission. Like Luke isn't giving Rey all the details. And there's this crazy scenario where Rian actually wants us to believe that the person we can trust is Kylo Ren. Like Kylo Ren's going to give us the truth. Like Kylo Ren's going to tell us what Luke really did. Kylo Ren is going to go to JakuAncestry.com and go, oh, where is Rey from? Oh, her parents were just druggies. And she's a nobody. Again, all of this he's feeding us from the mouth of Kylo Ren, and the director says, believe it. And I just say, so you're changing entire characters? You're shifting the entire backstory of characters from the mouth of the villain, and you want us to believe it. And again, this is totally, I understand why he did it. It's totally a reference to The Empire Strikes Back, because who's the one that tells the truth in The Empire Strikes Back? It's Darth Vader. Luke is sitting there and he says, you killed my father, and Vader says, I am your father. And there it is. It's the villain, the one who's speaking the truth in this matter. So I understand why he did it. It's just that I'm sitting there and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, not only are you saying that Luke Skywalker ran away, but now Luke Skywalker is ashamed to admit that this happened. He's not ashamed that he ran away. He's just ashamed to admit, oh yeah, I totally. Oh, by the way, sorry about the sniffles. It's really cold here in Florida. It's like 40. I'm just trying to play with you people up north. It's like 40 degrees here. It's actually quite comfortable. Let's see. Yeah, so Luke is a liar and a coward. Oh, and by the way, the only reason that Kylo Ren is Kylo Ren, the only reason that he tore down the shack that he was in and Luke gets buried and he burns the Jedi Temple is because Luke accidentally tapped the on button on his lightsaber with his thumb. That's the only reason he tapped the on button. So all of this happened, according to Rian Johnson, all of this happened because of a misunderstanding. Luke looks into Kylo's mind and he says, oh, I see some darkness. What's his name? Snoke already has him. So I'm like, I don't like this. And then he just goes, oops. It's on a lightsaber. And his nephew wakes up and his nephew's like, oh crap, my uncle's going to kill me. The whole thing was a misunderstanding. And that's why the entire world went to hell. Because Luke Skywalker accidentally tapped the button on his lightsaber. You gotta be kidding me, man. You gotta be kidding me. Anyway, I'll keep moving. And so Rian Johnson doesn't understand. Number one, Rian Johnson does not understand Luke Skywalker. He just doesn't. I mean, sorry, dude. All right. Number two, the reason I didn't like it is the poorly designed plot. So there's this moment where, they come out of hyperspace, the resistance, and then suddenly the First Order is right behind them and everybody goes, oh no, they can track us through hyperspace. and no one, and this is the thing, Rian Johnson's trying to move the plot forward very quickly. No one says, did they put a tracking device on our vehicle? Is there someone here who's a traitor on our ship? They immediately just say, oh no, they created innovative technology and they can track us anywhere. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Oh wait, the entire plot of the Empire Strikes Back was that they they couldn't use hyperspace. The Millennium Falcons, hyperspace wasn't working. And so what does a 1980s hero do, like Han Solo? He gets creative and he says, okay, Fine. We're going to fly into an asteroid field. We're going to leave with the trash off the Star Destroyer. We are going to make do without hyperspace. Like, that's... Instead, everybody's freaking out. And so basically, I mean, the point I'm making is that not being able to use hyperspace because you're being tracked is the same as not being able to use hyperspace because your ship is broken. So both of these movies, Empire Strikes Back and The Last Jedi, they're about hyperspace. Like, he's using this plot device, Rian Johnson's using this plot device of hyperspace. That's what the movie's centered around. But, and I know what you're saying, it's the same thing that I said. Well, didn't General Leia get creative? Didn't she say, okay, we're going to come up with this idea, we're going to get the transport ships to leave, and we're just going to escape? Here's what I don't get about this, and there may be something in the movie that I didn't pick up, and you can correct me on it. But, so you're telling me that Poe can zoom up to this ship in his little X-Wing, and someone comes up to General Hux and goes, sir, we have a lone X-Wing fighter in front of the ship. And he goes, oh yeah, I see it on our screens, there it is. And you're telling me that in the first Star Wars, 1977, C-3PO and R2-D2, they leave the Star Destroyer on an escape pod, or they leave their ship on an escape pod, and the Star Destroyer is able to track it and say, oh, there's no life forms in there, it's probably just one that just jettisoned. Like, so all these ships are able to track other ships, except for the transport ships that Leia is planning to use to get to this other planet. Like, these machines, these ships that have vast technology, they are unable to see ships leaving the bigger ship. Okay. Again, he's asking us to believe this. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, I know what some of you are saying at this point. You're saying, Nathan, most of you are still watching this, but some of you are saying, Nathan, it's a movie. With a movie, you just have to buy into it. That's the point. Like, it's all about suspension of, suspension of disbelief? Yeah, suspension of disbelief. And you're saying, but Nathan, you're just disbelieving. Like, you're not believing what he's giving us. And I agree that with Star Wars, like, that's what I want. You do have to have a suspension of disbelief. Like, I have to come into it and I have to say, okay, like, I have to just take in this universe as it is, and I'm not just analyzing this like it's gospel truth. Like, it's just going to be what it is. But at the same time, there are movies that respect you intellectually as you're feeding you this stuff. And suspension of disbelief does not mean that you believe everything that you're fed. I'll say that again. Suspension of disbelief does not mean that you believe everything that you're fed by the director. It simply means that you're willing to suspend your disbelief. That's what it means. And so to say, like, Nathan, like, you just got to suspend your disbelief, you just got to accept it for what it is. No, I don't. I have to enter into the movie and be willing to accept it. But when Rian Johnson is throwing garbage my way, no, I don't have to accept it. You don't do that with other movies, but when it comes to this movie, because you like it, when it comes to this movie, you're like, oh no, you've got to suspend disbelief. You just, there are elements that you can like. I don't have to. I just don't. And it's not just me. Like, nobody has to. Like, no rational person. If this wasn't Star Wars, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be like, you liked it, you didn't like it, whatever. All right. And, okay, so so one of the things another critique that I have about this is that it had an overhanded script. So many of the reviews, especially from the critics that I saw, was that it was like, Rian Johnson finally made a Star Wars movie for 2017. He doesn't stick with the black and white, the light and the dark. Rian Johnson has given us gray. Like, it's straight up post-modernity. It's straight up like metaphysics. Metaphysics is not the word I'm looking for. What's the word I'm looking for? It's straight up like skepticism. And the original trilogy, all the other Star Wars movies, they were just so black and white. But Rian Johnson actually makes us think. He makes us question things. He shows us that the First Order and the Resistance both buy ships from the same place. Man, you can't even trust. It's all about the military-industrial complex. This is, skepticism to the core. And no, he may say it in dialogue, but to say that the original trilogy was black and white just doesn't make any sense. You have so many characters that are scoundrels. You have so many characters in the first movie that make morally ambiguous choices. When we first meet Han Solo, he's blasting Greedo. In the original, he's blasting Greedo in a cantina. We meet, One of the great examples of this is Lando Calrissian. Like, is Lando Calrissian a scoundrel that betrays Luke and Han and Leia? Or, like, does Chewie deserve to choke him out? Or is he someone who legitimately is trying to help? It's like this gray area that you have to wrestle with the characters. Instead, Rian Johnson, he doesn't give you gray area. He just tells you. Like, there's no indirect characterization here. He's just like, let me write a line of dialogue that will tell you exactly, like, the nuances of this. And there's an entire segment of our society that will eat that up. They'll be like, oh yeah, oh, that's so deep because you told me. The original trilogy was deep because it didn't tell you. You had all these morally ambiguous characters that had to make these really tough choices, and it wasn't just like oh well, I sold you out because you got to do what you got to do, and I'm Benicio del Toro. It's not, what? I mean, come on. So if you can't even make an argument that the original trilogy doesn't deal with skepticism. It was made in 1977, and yes, George Lucas is a dreamer, but it totally deals with it was made in an age of skepticism. Postmodernity was like 40 years old at that point. Like, if you want to look at like nihilism was like 2,000 years old. If you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, nihilism was like 3,000 years old by that point. So none of the things that George Lucas explored in the original trilogy were absolutes. Like, the only people who talked about light and dark were the Jedi characters. Good and evil were the Jedi characters, and like, that's it. The rest of the movie was filled with all sorts of gray. So that's just, for people to say that Rian Johnson is deep for saying these things in a Star Wars movie, that's not deep. That's cheap. Oh, that's good. I'm a rapper. That's not deep. That's cheap. I mean, that's just what it is. So, I didn't even write that in my script. Okay. I don't know. Anyway, it's like 11 o'clock. I'm tired. I'm feeling myself. All right. So, then there's this thing where Kylo Ren, he looks at Rey. He looks at Rey and he says, you're a nobody and you need to embrace it. Enough with this legacy stuff. Enough with this royalty stuff that's going on. That's not what this is about. You need to embrace that anybody can be anything. Oh my gosh, Rian Johnson just totally threw out some lines for millennials, and millennials went, and they ate it up. You can be anything you want to be. Don't look at this. Okay, but I'm gonna ruin all of this for you. I'm gonna ruin all of this for you. Yes, Kylo Ren's mother was a princess, all right? But his father was a nobody. We first meet his dad in a bar, cantina. We meet him in a bar, and he's a criminal. That's his dad. So on that half of his family, Ben Solo does not come from royalty. He's not, like, Solo's not like this big name, right? And then go back one more generation, and this is where it all falls apart. His grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, if you include the prequels, was born into slavery. He was a slave. And the only reason he got out of slavery was because as an 8-year-old, he had to win a pod race against other criminals and grown adults. And then he had to have a card-carrying Jedi help him get out of it when Greedo didn't want it, or not Greedo, when the Tidarian dude, what's his name? Anyway, when the guy, his master, the guy who owned him, when he didn't want to let him out of the contract, he needed Qui-Gon Jinn to get him out. How can you say it's about royalty or legacy or any of this when Anakin Skywalker was a slave? I mean, if you were talking about generations of royalty, that's one thing. But Ben Solo came from nothing. He came from nothing. And you also can't rule out the fact that, oh, I don't know, why was Anakin Skywalker born? He was conceived out of the Force. Why did Luke Skywalker blow up the Death Star? Oh, I don't know. Maybe he used the Force and the Force helped him. Like, it wasn't that Luke Skywalker was anybody special. It wasn't that Anakin Skywalker was necessarily like royalty. Like, there is no such thing as Force royalty. It wasn't that his dad was like the super special guy. It was just that, like, there was the Force element. And there was just circumstances that just put Ben Solo where he was. And so the whole point that we have Ben Solo sitting there saying, like, Rey, who cares who your parents were? They were nobodies. Unlike me, I'm pedigreed. I run this galaxy. His entire lineage is nobodies. Like, Ben Solo's entire lineage is nobodies. And yet he's giving us this speech so that all these people who are watching it will be like, yeah, yeah, and the critics will be like, yeah, you're so right. He's breaking the mold. This Rian Johnson, he's a 21st century genius. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? Like, no, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not. And again, and give it like 5 years. In 5 years, when you watch this movie, you'll be like, man, there were some beautiful sequences in this movie, but it just falls apart. All right. So that's that. Now let me talk about logical gaps, and this is where I am going to stop it because I have no idea how much I don't know if anybody's still watching, and I don't know how much hard drive space that I have left. So I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to have part 2, which picks up with the logical gaps in The Last Jedi. I hope you're enjoying this for those 3 of you that are still watching. All right, thanks. Bye. All right, so this is The Last Jedi review, part 2, if you made it this far, if you care. And it's a good thing that I stopped my last part 1 short because I was almost out of space in my phone. So here I go. I got a full 32 gigs to talk. All right, and before I jump into, I left off with logical gaps in The Last Jedi. Before I jump into that, I just want to say that I was not one of those people, like a fanboy, who was on the internet like looking up theories about Snoke or any of these other people. What I did was I watched The Force Awakens, and I think I saw it one other time outside of theaters, and then I didn't look at anything. Like, even when the trailers were coming out for The Last Jedi, I was like, no, I don't want any spoilers. I just, like, all I'm wanting is a great Star Wars movie. And when I saw the great, critical reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, when I heard that Rian Johnson was going to get his own trilogy, I was like, sweet, like, this is great. Like, this is going to be a great movie. And so I was totally ready to go in and just, see a great movie. And if you watch part 1, you know that that's laughable at this point, at least in my opinion. So, okay, The Last Jedi, logical gaps in The Last Jedi that I struggled with. And again, what I said is that one of the things I love about Star Wars movies is that you can come into it with all that you are. You can come into it and you can just, like, you can take it in with your eyes and your feelings, and you can be in it that way, and you can suspend disbelief. But the thing I also love about Star Wars is that it's intellectually engaging. I said at the beginning of my part 1 review that there were 5 things that I look for in a Star Wars movie. That number 1, it tells a good story. Number 2, that it has strong, consistent characters. Number 3, that it has great VFX or video special effects and action sequences. Number 4, that it stirs my imagination. And number 5, that it's big enough for my eyes and my brain. The Last Jedi was definitely big enough for my eyes, but when it came to my brain, I don't think Rian Johnson expected us to bring that to this movie. Or rather, he wanted to narrate or include dialogue that did all the thinking for us. So allow me to think for you. Feel free to check your brain at the door and just enjoy this eye candy that I'm about to throw at you. Just enjoy the fact that I'm going to give you some action sequences that you've never seen before, the equivalent of Yoda fighting in Attack of the Clones. I'm going to give you some awesome action sequences in Snoke's throne room. I'm going to give you some great ships going through ships at hyperspeed. So he gave us a lot of eye candy in this movie. So he gave us a lot for our eyes that I could definitely walk out of the movie and be like, wow, that stuff was pretty cool. Like, I've never seen that before in a Star Wars movie. But when you actually like engage it with your brain, I personally didn't find anything there. And the things that the critics are saying are so beautiful and amazing and revolutionary about this movie. As I hope I demonstrated in part 1 or just shared my thoughts, they weren't. It's just the director or the screenwriter thinking out loud for us and instead of letting us do the thinking, which is what I feel like the original trilogy did well. All right, so let's talk about logical gaps that I noticed in The Last Jedi. Okay, number 1. This is a huge one. And I have to give my brother Cody credit for this because we talked about this in a conversation. If Luke Skywalker wanted to run away and Luke Skywalker did not want to be found, why in the freaking world did he leave a map to his location? No, I'm waiting because I really want you to answer that. Why? Why did he... J.J. Abrams, the entire Force Awakens it's Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker. We only have pieces of the map, but we need to find the full map. That's what happens in Force Awakens. And then you get the Last Jedi, and Luke is like, I never wanted anyone ever to find me here. How did you get here? How did I find you, Luke? I followed the map that you left. This is ridiculous, right? I mean, I'm not crazy here. It's ridiculous. The things that he wants you to believe. The things that he expected me to believe. It's ridiculous. All right, next up. This is one that I was thinking about in real time as I was watching the movie the first time. If Snoke, this powerful dude, if Snoke can force connect Rey and Kylo, if he can force connect Rey and Kylo, how in the world is he not powerful enough to know Luke Skywalker's location? Like, so what Rian Johnson is basically expecting us to do is to believe that Darth Vader in Star Wars sensed that Obi-Wan was on the Death Star. General Tarkin, or Grand Admiral Tarkin, whatever his name is, Obi-Wan is here. Obi-Wan is on the Death Star. And what Rian Johnson wants us to believe is that Darth Vader aimlessly, he could sense him, but he aimlessly searched the entire Death Star until he found Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, there you are. Dang it, I've gone through 2,338 corridors, but now I found you, Obi-Wan. That's the equivalent of Snoke being able to... Oh, hey. Do you need some milk, buddy? Okay. Hey, what do you think of stuff? All right. Sorry, dad moment. All right, so that's the equivalent. So Darth Vader aimlessly wandering around the Death Star is the equivalent of Snoke being able to go, there's Kylo. I know where Kylo is. He's on my ship. So, here's Kylo. Where's Rey? There she is. I found both of them, and I'm going to force connect them, but I have no idea of the general vicinity of Luke Skywalker's location. No, that's ridiculous. If Snoke has this power to find Rey, then maybe I'm wrong here, but you've got to be able to like see through her eyes, or you've got to be able to locate Luke Skywalker. Like, and so for him to be like, "Where's Luke Skywalker?" You tell me. You're the one with this insane power that we've never seen before in the Star Wars universe. You tell me where he is. I had to spend the entire first movie finding a map. Like, to find where Luke Skywalker is. And all you could just connect through me and find this island. Like, Mr. Snoke. So, we're supposed to believe this. Okay, so, whether you believe that or not, whatever. Okay, logical gaps. Number 3. The movie starts with Poe flying his ship up to General Hux's ship, and then saying your mama jokes, and, playing back and forth with him. And then, once General Hux says, attack him, then Poe goes in and starts destroying the turrets on the ship. This makes no sense unless you look at this scene from like a director writing an intro. Makes no sense. In the Star Wars universe, when you pull up to another ship, you surprise them. You surprise them. And instead, Poe pulls up and he has a 2-minute-long dialogue with General Hux, and all the time while he's doing that, the people in the TIE Fighter Bay are getting prepared. Like, they're hopping in their ships. And so if Poe had just done what everyone else in the Star Wars universe does and just, like, goes in, single fighter, as quickly as he can and starts destroying turrets, they don't have 2 minutes to prepare. Now, maybe I'm just crazy for thinking this, but I think you can directly relate Poe, like, making jokes with lots of people dying, including Rose's sister. If Poe hadn't been this like jokester flying in and like, hey, I want to play with the general of this ship and make him mad, then he could have destroyed those turrets and gotten out of there. If R2-D2 had been in the ship instead of BB-8 plugging holes, I think that, he might have been able to do it a little faster too. But anyway, I like BB-8. He's fine. All right, so So I'd say Poe, if you can follow that rabbit trail, Poe's responsible for Rose's sister's death. He's responsible for all those people dying. So, it is what it is. Let's see, what else? Here's another one, logical gaps. On the red salt planet, I don't know what planet it is, it took 10 minutes for Rose and Finn and everybody else, like, they're like it took 10 minutes of them taking their speeders out to the AT-ATs and that big, whatever, laser cannon. They're going out for 10 minutes, and then it takes Finn only 3 minutes to drag an unconscious Rose back across the salt field, the miles across the salt field, into safety before the AT-ATs get there. So, for literally 5 minutes, we see them going, like flying out there, and then they're immediately back. And if you say, like, oh, that's just filmmaking, maybe that is a personal thing, but it just annoys me. Like, even in The Dark Knight, in the opening sequence, when that bus smashes through the bank, it annoyed me that Christopher Nolan, the bus didn't even hit the dude. Like, the bus comes in, it is clearly, when you watch the movie, the bus is like 6 feet from the guy, and the guy goes, ugh, and he flies back. I don't enjoy that. I understand that there's movie making, and then there's things that just, you expect me to believe, but they just don't make sense. And again, it's just one of the things I noticed. I was like, how did they get back before? Anyway. All right. Logical gaps number 2. How does Han Solo's dice, like Kylo Ren comes into the base, like the old Rebel base, and he picks up the dice, and the dice, after he picks them up, they disappear after Luke Skywalker has, become one with the Force. So Luke Skywalker does his whole, projection thing, and then you see him, climb up on the rock. You see, the two suns ascending, and then he disappears. And then you get this scene where, and then it goes to Leia feeling it, and then you get this scene where Kylo Ren comes in and takes his dad's dice and holds them, and then they disappear. So Luke disappears first, and then the dice disappear 5 minutes later. And it doesn't make sense. And it's not even like a bad edit. This sequence was supposed to go right after this sequence. It's not even that. It's just I just don't think he cared. All right, that's the next one's kind of petty. I don't like that one. I'm just curious. Luke Skywalker goes off feeling bad about himself. He's off depressed. He goes off to his own place, and he's like, I'm gonna run away from all my responsibilities and all the people I love, and I'm just gonna, the person I trained killed Han Solo, probably my best friend. But, it is what it is. Where were Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin during this? All throughout Luke's life, there have been these figures that have counseled him. Hey, Luke, you're going to do something stupid. Or, hey, Luke, I'm going to give you some guidance here. And then suddenly, Luke, they just don't talk to him anymore. Except when he's having a meltdown and he's going to go burn down a tree, and then Yoda shows up and goes, where were they? That doesn't... Here's what would have happened in the real Star Wars universe, not Rian Johnson's alternate weird universe. What would have happened is Luke is like, oh man, I failed. And then Yoda and Obi-Wan and a bunch of people would have showed up, and Yoda would have said, hey, I talked to the Sith Lord, and he was the head of the Republic for years, and I didn't even know. I screwed up. Everybody screws up. And then Obi-Wan says, hey man, I trained Darth Vader. I trained your dad, and it was a miserable failure. And I even burned him to a crisp, in a lava flow. That's a failure. And then he talks to his dad, and Anakin Skywalker's like, yeah, so I murdered everybody. I helped Emperor Palpatine all this time. And so Luke talks to these people, and he's like, yeah, you know what? This whole Ben Solo thing, me accidentally hitting the lightsaber, it's not that bad. I look at my dad, whew, thanks, Dad, because I was feeling bad, but then I heard your story, and I'm good. I can go fight the First Order. That's what would have happened in the real Star Wars universe. But instead, Rian Johnson wants us to buy into his bullcrap universe. All right, so let's move past logical gaps. I could keep going, but some of these are just petty. I think it would take away from the main message I'm trying to get across. All right, so let's talk about some painfully bad sequences. And this has been pretty unanimous. Most people, even people who like the movie, they agree that these are really bad sequences. Really, really bad sequences. The obviously bad sequence that all my students fell asleep on, that Anderson Cooper apparently was about to fall asleep during. The second time I watched the movie, I was about to fall asleep during this sequence, is when Rose and Finn go to the rich planet. I don't even know what it's called. It's just the rich planet. They go there and they experience the rich planet, the life of the rich, rich people. And then there's this like strange exchange where like we're supposed to connect with these slave children who are trying, and there's also these creatures, these I don't know what they are, but they're four-legged creatures they are bred to race and they're beat, and we're supposed to connect with all these characters. And then like if you think about it, Rose and Finn, they escaped on the creatures and they set the creatures free. But they left the slave children as slaves. I don't know. I have a problem with that. Like, if I ever met a child who was a slave, like, I mean, it's just my personality. Because I would be the person that dies. I wouldn't be the person that's like, hold on, let me go back to another planet and get my committee and get them excited about this, and then I'll come back and I'll make action happen. Like, I am the type of person that if I met a child who was enslaved and who was being beaten, I would be like, okay, whatever it takes, even if I have to die, you're coming with me. Like totally an Indiana Jones Temple of Doom moment. Like, I've got the Shankara stones, but I'm gonna go back in and get the slave kids. Like that, and maybe that's just me. But anyway, Rose and Finn are like, I'm so sorry that you're enslaved. Here, take a ring. Now I'm going to steal the creatures, and hopefully they don't beat you for helping me. Okay. All right. And there's like this really strange, Rian Johnson wants us to feel really bad for these animals. Like, these just random animals on a rich planet. Like, it's just like, oh, they're beating these animals to the point that there's wounds on them, and you need to set them free. I don't know what's happening. What does this have to do with the plot? What does this have to do with the movie? It's like I don't even understand. It's like a prequel thing. It's like one of those like subplots that George Lucas would do, and you're like, why did you? That was so unnecessary. Why did you do that? Like, you could literally edit that out of the movie, and they didn't do it. And then this is my brothers as well. What was their plan? So Finn and Rose, they escaped from the jail on this rich planet. And they're on one of these creatures, and they're riding through the city, and then they get out onto the beach, and for some reason, this rich planet that's like based off of like the suburbs or something like that, they've left their ship just sitting in the sand in an illegal spot. They've left it just sitting in the sand. But what is Finn and Rose's plan? They don't have the code breaker. They don't have BB-8. They're just running toward their ship with nothing, literally nothing. And then, it gets blown up and everything. But like, think about their motivations. Like, we didn't get anything we're supposed to. Our friends are probably going to get shot down by the First Order, but we got to make it back to this ship. Okay. All right. Sure. Okay, guys. All right. By the way, like, I couldn't help but notice the connections. It's not really a connection, but there's in the Matrix Reloaded, you've got the key maker, and you've got to find the key maker, and he's going to unlock the door to the mainframe. And then in this movie, which is also a sequel to a first film, you have the code breaker. So interesting. I think I like the key maker a little better. But then speaking of the key maker, another painfully bad sequence is this Maz sequence. Maz is like the little alien from The Force Awakens, and she's got like the glasses. She helps Rey find Luke's lightsaber, but the only time we see her in this is when Poe. And did Poe ever meet Maz? And I don't even know if he knows her. Poe says, "Oh, I got an idea, and I know just who to contact." And so he gets on, like, he pulls up a hologram of Maz, who for some reason has a drone going with her as she's fighting in a union dispute. Like, the drone is following her, and she's like, "Hey, what's up, Poe? How you doing, man? How can I help you?" Which is just ridiculous to begin with. And then there's this, like, video game moment. It's like, you know how in a video game, like, there's someone's telling you what to do, and they're like, "Yeah, and here's what you need to look for." Bling! And the symbol you need to look for, like, just pops up. Maz is like, "Yeah, and you need to look for, like, this flower emblem that the code breaker has." And it just pops up in the hologram. It just, like, pops up, like, right there next to her. It looks like this. It's such a cheap move as a filmmaker. Like Like it's like trying to cram as much as possible into not only a ridiculous hologram, but then like you just say, I don't care anymore. I got to move it in this direction. They got to find the guy who has the carnation on his vest. Boom, it's gonna pop up in the hologram. So what? People are gonna eat it up. They're gonna accept it, and people did accept it. So I was like, what in the world is going on? All right, other painfully bad sequences. Any sequence that had Laura Dern in it, who, by the way, I have no problems with Laura Dern. She was amazing in Jurassic Park. Any sequence, any scene with Laura Dern in it was awful. I felt so bad for her. I don't know if she should have been cast in that role. I don't know if it was her lines. It was just terrible, painfully terrible. And when she looked at Poe and she's like, "Fly boy," I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, this is ridiculous. And just the condescension with which she spoke to him, and not even that. I think I might even mention somewhere about General Leia. I'll get to that in a second. So now I mentioned that I'm gonna dive into the characters. So here's what I thought about the individual characters in the movie. Kylo Ren is 12 hours fresh from murdering his father, and then we get this sequence where he's coming up on General Leia, his mom, and he's like, I don't know if I can do it. This character is so confusing. This character, like, especially as Rian Johnson writes him, it makes no sense. Like, I really don't know how Adam Driver, like, managed to, like, pull to anything out of this character, because he's just all over the place. He doesn't make sense, but like, Adam Driver somehow does it. It's by the quality of his acting ability. But anyway, I don't understand his character. Like, I really don't. He, like, is it because he cares about his mom more than his dad? Is it that he had daddy issues, so he had no problem killing his dad? Why does he hesitate about killing his mom? Like, like, what is it? Like, what? Anyway, so, like, for someone hell-bent on destroying the past, he sure doesn't, like, he sure lets somebody else, murder his mom, like, which is the same thing as killing your mom. Like, if you could stop someone from killing your mom and you let them kill your mom, it's the same thing. But I just don't understand why he had to draw, why there was a difference. Okay, so there's that. Laura Dern's character, purple-haired lady, general lady, just awful through and through, in my opinion. Finn was one of my favorite characters from The Force Awakens, and now he's just chopped down to one-liners. When the actual movie comes out, I'll be interested. I hope somebody does an edit where they take every line of Finn's from this movie and they just put them together. Because all of his lines are like, whoa, watch out. What do you mean? Like, he's like this just like side character that just like is reduced to nothing now. Bring it, Chrome Dome. Oh, man. Bring it, Chrome Dome. That was a great line. All right, Rose. Kelly Marie Tran, I should have put this as like one of the things I liked about this movie. I thought she was spectacular, like as Rose. I love the casting. I don't think Rian Johnson should have been at the helm of this movie, but he wrote the character, and I thought she did a great job. Like, when we were introduced to her as Finn was trying to escape from the escape pod, that was just awesome. Except for like her pose at the end, like when she shocks him and then she goes, like, that was just really forced. The director should have noticed that and should have been like, yeah, okay, you can't pause at the end and just hesitate. Like, that's not what real people do. But other than that, like, I really enjoyed her character, but Rian Johnson gave her terrible lines. And I'm going to misquote this, but the line that will live in infamy from this movie that is perhaps on par with Anakin Skywalker saying, "I hate sand. Sand is so coarse. Not like you. Your skin is smooth." The line that will probably be on par with that from this movie is the random sequence where she's just like, I could put my whole fist through this town. What? What does that mean? Like, it's this whole thing, like, we should care about it because the characters care about it. Like, that's what Ryan's trying to pitch to us. You should care about these rich people exploiting people. You should care about, like, obviously we do care anytime we see children being exploited or animals being exploited. But it's just like this whole thing where, like, from being in this place for 5 minutes, we are supposed to despise it and everyone in it. I just wish I could. And then there's that line. And again, I don't think this is that bad of a line if they'd done it right. But there's that line when Rose swoops in and she saves Finn and she says, "We're not doing this to fight the people we hate. We're doing it to fight for the people we love," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, which explains the reason why she came over and kind of sideswiped Finn and quote unquote saved him. But it doesn't relate to the scene at all. Finn wasn't going into that laser thing because he hated the First Order. He was going into that laser thing because he loved his friends that were trying to get away. So the line just doesn't make sense. Like, it makes sense if Finn is like, I hate you guys, suicide mission, you made me, but now I'm going to end you. Like, that would make sense. But for her to say her line when he was actually acting out of love, and then, I thought the kiss was fine. That was fine. I mean, I could see a Finn and Rose relationship happening, and I'm totally cool with that. All right, and last is Hux. This is one of the biggest ironies of the movie. Rian Johnson, who is the director of Brick, I don't know if you've seen Brick, I think it came out in like 2005 or something like that. One of the things that is great about Brick, in my opinion, is that Rian Johnson cast people in their 20s, and they had to say lines and act out positions and roles as if they were gangsters in their 50s. And it worked really, really well. He was able to take really, really young people and put them in a movie, cast them in a movie where they were playing much older roles, and it had this really cool feel to it. It left you with like this, wow, I've never seen that before. That's pretty awesome. And ironically, the director who made Brick, where he made young people seem more mature, he took General Hux and transformed him from a young-looking character to a 14-year-old constantly throwing hissy fits. So he went the opposite direction. Instead of taking General Hux, a young guy, and making him a little more mature, which is what JJ attempted to do, because it's a risk casting a young guy as a general, he took the general and just made him throw tantrums the entire time. And made him just like give side eyes like, I hate you, Kylo Ren, and I'm going to try to kill you in the third movie, but I'm not going to do it yet. Which is that's a prequel move as well. In the original Star Wars series, you don't see that many side eyes, but in the prequels, you see them all the time. And so Rian Johnson worked his magic in reverse this time and made Hux this whiny kid. All right, so let's get to plot devices. So there's one plot device that I think Rian Johnson kind of did right in this movie, and that's this new. So if you don't know what a plot device is, it's something that an author or a screenwriter or a creator uses consistently to drive the story forward. It's these elements that you can like take like a piece of code and insert it into a story, and it's going to function a certain way. It's going to produce a certain result. And there's three main, just to give you an example, there's three plot devices I'm going to talk about. The first one is like force connections. The second one is supernatural abilities, kind of like the wizard archetype. And then you've got hyperspace, which is unique to Star Wars because it's set in space. And so the thing I think he did sort of right was the force connection. I really liked visually what he was doing when Kylo and Rey were having these conversations. It was uncomfortable. So anyway, I really like that visually, because up until this point, all we've gotten is just Luke feeling Darth Vader or Luke and Leia sensing each other. But to have people in this, like, be able to see each other across the galaxy, visually, that was really cool. Now, the invasion of privacy aspect of that and how that plot device is, that it's really a plot device extension. How that's going to be used in the Star Wars universe, I'm curious about, because it's really strange. Like, I mean, what if like instead of, and this is like really weird, I know, but what if instead of Kylo Ren having his shirt off, what if it had been Rey? Like, it's just Kylo Ren shows up and he's like, oh, sorry. Like, the idea that people with force powers can just like pop into other people's lives now, it will be interesting to see how other directors take that, or if they decide to use that. But again, I'm saying that I'm listening to this as kind of a positive. I really like it visually, and I think you can do it right. All right. So it's cheesy, but I wrote, it's kind of like force Skype, but it could become forced Skype if you just pop in on people. Corny reference of this video. All right, so the next one is supernatural abilities. So obviously in the Star Wars universe, the supernatural abilities, it's the Jedi, it's the Sith. Those are the people that have it. And so Rian Johnson, just like the Force connection, his whole thing is like, and again, I can already see into his mind, he's like, okay, he's sitting down to write the script and he's like, what are Star Wars plot devices? Okay, we've got this and we've got this and we've got this. Okay, how can I take them to the next level? How can I amp them up? And so he obviously did it with the Force connection. But then he took another one. He said, the supernatural abilities. How can I take it to the next level? And he said, I know. I am going to, let me see here. I'm going to do this like Force projection where Luke Skywalker isn't really going to be fighting Kylo Ren. It's just going to be a projection that Leia can touch, a projection that C-3PO, who is a robot, can look and be like, Master Luke. So he's like physically there, so physically, visually there that a robot can see him, like his presence. So Luke is projecting himself, and this is definitely new to the Star Wars universe. Like this idea of like, it's taking the supernatural abilities that we've seen from all these crazy Jedis, and he's saying like there's this idea that from studying the ancient Jedi texts or whatever, Luke has figured out how to project himself. Which, okay, it's okay. I didn't like it, but it's okay. But the problem is that like moving forward, if you create that plot device, it really does introduce this element that I don't like of skepticism into the Star Wars universe. Like I won't be able to enter into a Star Wars universe movie ever again and take characters for characters. Like, oh, that Jedi that's in front of him, he may not really be there. And that's not cool. That ruins it for me because I like to, and I mean, most movie audiences in general like to know that the characters they see are the characters that are there. And you could say like, oh, it makes it like a chess match, but I don't think so. And there's even people who are speculating that when, and this is like rumors I saw online, that when Kylo Ren like turned the lightsaber and killed Snoke, that the reason Snoke was surprised is because Snoke wasn't really there. Snoke was also doing a Force projection, and that Snoke is actually still alive. But whatever, man. Snoke's got to be dead for storytelling purposes. Like, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I think Snoke is dead, but there's theories out there based on this new supernatural ability, which creates a whole slew of other problems. Okay, and here's the big one. Hyperspace, plot device. In Star Wars, in the Star Wars universe, this plot device has been used for two things. Surprise and escape. That's it. So if you want to surprise somebody, you fly in really fast and the entire fleet's there. Or you need to get away, boom, you can fly away very quickly and you can escape. So in Star Wars, traditionally hyperspace is used for escape and surprise, or surprise and escape. In this movie, once again, Rian Johnson looked at the plot device. He said, how can I take hyperspace, this plot device, and take it to the next level? Because Rian Johnson's all about the next level. He's a genius. It's 21st century genius, Rian Johnson. Watch out. All right, so he says, I am going to make hyperspace, I'm going to take this entire plot device and I'm going to, number one, make it obsolete. So I'm going to say it doesn't matter because we can track you now. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to make it obsolete. Almost as obsolete as Han Solo not being able to use it. And then he said, number two, I'm going to weaponize it. Now, I'm going to tell you, from the time I was 10 years old, playing with Star Wars toys and our Millennium Falcon as a kid, I imagined what it would be like for one ship to fly through another ship at hyperspeed. Like, I imagined that. But then even my 10-year-old self, I was like, yeah, but that would ruin so much. Like, it doesn't make sense. So my 10-year-old self said, nah, it would be cool, but it doesn't work with Star Wars. You just can't do it. Like, it's cool to imagine it, but you just can't do it. And here's why. Well, anyway, so those are the two things that he did. And I think for me, it showcases his, as I perceive it, arrogance in wanting to just like take plot devices and scrap them or like take them and completely change them and weaponize them, and maybe ignorance. I don't know what it is on his part, but like, here's why I call it arrogance. It's not respecting the universe. You think that over thousands of years of space travel and space battle in the Star Wars universe, that no one thought to send one ship through another ship at hyperspeed. Like, when the first Death Star is bearing down on Yavin 4, it's going to destroy the entire rebellion, and they were having a hard time, like Luke and nobody was hitting their targets at the Death Star. You didn't think any of those people were like, oh man, what could we do? What's a last minute plan to take out the Death Star? let's fly through it at hyperspace or hyperspeed. No, it wasn't on the table. It wasn't an option. And it wasn't because they didn't think about it. It was because the creators of Star Wars, George Lucas, had closed that off. He said it diminishes the plot device of hyperspace. And then what was I saying here? Also, you think that thousands of years of people who have built these amazing ships, the Death Star. Shout out to that dude in Rogue One. What's his name? The actor that plays Hannibal. Anyway, he's awesome. So apparently he designed the Death Star. You don't think the designers of the Death Star, you don't think the designers of the Star Killer base, you don't think that of all the brilliant designers in the Star Wars universe, none of them said, hey, what if someone flew a ship into our multi-trillion-dollar ship? They don't have a plan for that? They don't have a plan for that. And again, George Lucas would never have dreamed of putting this stuff in his movies because George Lucas is like, nah, it ruins the plot device. It's a consistent plot device. It's Star Wars through and through. Like, you just can't fly a ship through another ship at hyperspeed. Now, again, was it awesome? Was it cool? Was it beautiful? Did it leave you in awe? Did it feed your eyes? Yes. It was beautiful. I was sitting in the theaters like, whoa. My 10-year-old self was like, that was awesome. Again, Attack of the Clones. Awesome sequences don't necessarily make a great movie. So, and again, he ruined this plot device. He ruined it. Because now any ship can just go boom, 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 and be like a nuclear blast on any larger ship. And so, yeah. So, it's not a fan. So, in conclusion, this is the end. This is the end. I believe that Rian Johnson, hey, and here's the thing. I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure, and I know he's a talented guy because I've seen his other movies. This isn't like, I know it sounds like it is a criticism because I don't like this movie. I think he made a mistake. I think he royally screwed up. But I'm not attacking him as a person. I'm really just attacking him as a screenwriter. Like, not even as a director. As a screenwriter, I think his script screwed up. I think it messed up a lot of stuff. And here's the problem. We literally now had one chance in time, one space of time to have a trilogy that included Han Solo, Leia, and Mark Hamill and do it right. And I mean, it was evidenced at the end of 2016 when Carrie Fisher tragically passed away. Rian Johnson had one shot to make a movie with General Leia. And instead he made a movie where Poe disobeyed her orders and she just goes, Poe, you shouldn't have done that. I'm going to demote you. Like, Poe killed people. Like, Poe killed a lot of people because and again, Poe's character wouldn't do this. Rian Johnson just totally messed up Poe's character. But Rian Johnson's version of Poe, just like Rian Johnson's version of Luke, they're just entities of their own. They don't fit with the characters themselves. They're Rian Johnson's unique creation, and he can own them. And in 5 years, 10 years time, when people are like, man, it's not that great, he can own them. He can take them. But the only problem with that, the reason I'm upset, is that you had one shot to use Carrie Fisher. One shot perhaps to use Harrison Ford. One shot perhaps to use Mark Hamill. And you blew it. You freaking blew it, dude. And that's not cool. That's not cool at all. So, and honestly, I'm glad that JJ killed off Han Solo, because who knows what Rian Johnson would have done with him. Like, Rian Johnson would have totally, just think about it, Rian Johnson would have totally screwed up the Han Solo character. He would have just made this version of Han that didn't make any sense. Even Han Solo, like, running away, Ben turned bad, and he left Leia, and he ran off on his own in The Force Awakens. Like, that's the way that, like, the inner scoundrel in him would respond to that situation. Like, it fits with his character. And then at the end, it also fits with the redemption side of his character, that he goes back for his son and he tries to save Ben. But I'm so thankful that JJ killed him off. I'm so thankful that JJ killed off Han Solo, because, man, if Rian Johnson, I mean, I'm so mad. Again, it's because I care. You're saying, it's just a story, man. It's just a character. Why do you care? Because I care. Because I love the Star Wars universe. So deal with it. And Luke Skywalker is one of my favorite characters. I mean, he probably shaped me in a lot of ways. And so for Rian Johnson to just take these characters and just be like, I'm just going to do my own thing with them. Like, I'm so glad JJ had Han Solo. I'm so glad he killed him off. And seriously, guys, I'm done with people giving, and people can do whatever they want, but I'm just so tired of people giving Rian Johnson like credit for doing something new and outside the box with this sequel. There's nothing new and outside the box with the sequel. If you want to see a director doing something outside the box, again, look at Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. You've got Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. They make the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is an international hit. You know, it harkens back to the 1930s and just like just an adventure movie through and through. And sure, there's like the Ark of the Covenant and like turns, melts people's faces and stuff. But it is what it is. It's an adventure movie. And then the sequel to that, Temple of Doom, George Lucas goes to Steven Spielberg and says, I want to do something different with this sequel. I want it to take place in India. I want it to be about the occult. And I want there to be sequences where the main bad guy, Mularam, reaches into people's chests, pulls their heart out while it's still beating, and they're still alive, and then sacrifices them as human sacrifices as the heart is burning in their hands. I want like Harrison Ford to drink a cup of blood and fall under this like spell where he becomes a part of the thuggy religion. That's crazy, guys. Rian Johnson's got nothing on Temple of Doom. Everybody should know he's got nothing on George Lucas. Nothing. 1977 George Lucas, 1980 George Lucas. He doesn't even have anything on George Lucas in the prequels. Like Rian Johnson, he created Looper. That's the closest thing to an original universe he's created. George Lucas created every tool in the toy chest that Rian Johnson had to play with. Every plot device that Rian Johnson could have just inserted and made a good story. Rian's like, I gotta totally spin this. But anyway, George Lucas says, we're gonna make a sequel that just goes all out. Oh, and by the way, we're gonna rate it PG so the kids go into the movie theater and see hearts being pulled out. I don't know if you know this, but the Temple of Doom invented the PG-13 rating. It was one of the films that invented the PG-13 rating because at that point, there was only PG and R. And Temple of Doom was so graphic that they had to create a PG-13 rating for it. But if you want to give somebody credit for making a great sequel, give it to Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. Because with Temple of Doom, that is taking risks. That is taking like a surefire moneymaker and saying, we're just going to tell the story that we want to tell. And it's still going to, here's the big thing, unlike Rian Johnson, it's still going to fit with the indie character. It's going to further the indie character. It's going to move his character further along instead of like regressing like Luke Skywalker's character did. That's how you make a sequel, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you're a revolutionary. So you got to give respect where respect is due. And I'm not giving any respect to Rian Johnson when it comes to this movie. I'm going to give respect to movies that deserve it. All right. At the end of the day, like I said, Rian Johnson, he made huge mistakes in this movie, but like I always tell my students, or like the chant that we would say at the beginning of class, I will make good mistakes and I will learn from them. I think this movie's a mistake. I don't know. Usually people, if you try to tell them something's a mistake, most people in this world are insulated and they surround themselves with people who are, affirm their beliefs. And especially with the critical response to this movie, Rian Johnson probably thinks he made the greatest Star Wars movie on the planet. But it's a mistake. And at the end of the day, I hope that he makes some really good, that separate trilogy that he's making. I hope it's just phenomenal. I wish him the best. I hope he makes good Star Wars movies. And actually, I have no doubt that I'm going to walk into some of his future Star Wars movies and be like, man, that was a good movie. It's not necessarily going to redeem The Last Jedi, but Rian Johnson's he's going to contribute to the Star Wars universe. And again, my critique is of his script. My critique is of the movie The Last Jedi, not him as a person. The dude's definitely got talent. If you've seen any of his other movies, the dude definitely has talent. He doesn't understand these characters, in my opinion. And the best part, moving forward, the thing that we can all be excited about, whether you love the movie or hated the movie, is that Disney got rid of the guy who made Jurassic World, which was just blah, and they replaced him with J.J. Abrams. JJ is I think he's going to do a phenomenal job. I think the third film is going to be awesome. I think it's going to redeem The Last Jedi. Like I said, my current plan is to not even tell my son or daughter that The Last Jedi exists. I'm just going to there's going to be The Force Awakens, and then whether I write a storybook or draw a picture book, or whether they just connect without. It would be awesome if JJ made a movie where his third movie, like, it just fit with, like, he totally, like, since Rian Johnson screwed a bunch of his plot devices, it would be hilarious if J.J. Abrams was just like, I'm going to pretend that The Last Jedi didn't happen. So you can just watch The Force Awakens, and just like I did with Star Wars Return of the Jedi, you can watch this and you can watch this, and they fit together. And you don't even need that middle section. But anyway, regardless, JJ is going to do a great job with it. I doubt that you've made it this far. I just wanted my voice to be heard. I wanted you to know why I had such a strong reaction to this movie. And again, the thing that I would just ask is that, man, just love on each other. Like, we are all fans of the Star Wars universe. And again, I told you my 5 things that I like about the Star Wars universe. I want to tell a good story, strong, consistent characters, special effects, stirs my imagination, big enough for my eyes and my brain. But there are some of you out there that, I mean, you really want Star Wars. What it is to you is it stirs your imagination, has awesome special effects. And you're like, that's a great movie. Whew, that was an awesome Star Wars movie. I'd never seen anything like that. And that's okay. Like, we're all part of the Star Wars universe. But the reason I've even started this trek, because I'm in a very busy season of life. Got a big project I'm working on, and the last thing I wanted to do was interrupt it with 2 hours of Star Wars commentary and a GoFundMe and all that stuff. But the reason I did it is just because you gotta, especially in today's society, you've just gotta let other people have opinions. You just can't call people silly or stupid or fanboys or whatever label you want to throw at people because they have legitimate concerns about something. And we see it in politics, we see it in religion, we see it in every arena of life. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's always been this way, but it just seems more in our culture today. If you disagree with somebody, you just call them an idiot. You just say you don't understand what you're talking about. And then you find groups of people who share your opinion, and then you're insulated. And so if you liked The Last Jedi, like, all power to you. Like, cool. Like, hopefully you've been able to pull some stuff out of this review if you're still watching. Like, whoever's still watching this. Hopefully you're able to pull some stuff out of this review that you're like, oh yeah, I never thought about it like that. Or, gosh, Nathan, you ruined this entire movie for me. I can never see it again. Or the same. But, I mean, honestly, just let's not hate on each other. It's okay to hold opinions, even extreme opinions. Like, people who say this is the worst Star Wars movie ever, that's their opinion, and they might have valid reasons for it. And so just because you think it's the best Star Wars movie ever doesn't mean that you can say that to them, or vice versa. Even though I think I'm right about this movie, and I'm even so bold enough to say that you're going to hate it in 5 or 10 years, like, I have to admit that I could be wrong, Like, in that there are elements to this movie or elements that connect to your childhood that I just can't understand, that make it meaningful to you. And so I've got to respect that, and you've got to respect, you don't have to, but hopefully you can see my point of view. And yeah, so thanks for watching this. Hope you enjoyed it. For those of you who, man, I'll give you like a sticker, I'll give you a cookie if you made it all the way to the end, because that's pretty impressive. Thanks for hearing me out. I even surpassed Kevin Johnson in my commentary, or Kevin, what's his name, Smith, in my commentary. So it is what it is. All right, thank you so much. Love you, Star Wars fans. Bye.